Hi, another film I watched last weekend that I found much more enjoyable was Benediction, the new film by Terence Davies. It's the story of Siegfried Sassoon, who I'm sure we all remember from GCSE English classes as one of the great World War One poets. And he's played in the film by Jack Lowden, but also by Peter Capaldi when the film flashes forward to later in Sassoon's life. The film is an interesting artifact in that it uses a lot of World War One footage. It uses recitations of Sassoon's poetry. There's a lot of impressionistic elements to it, of combining actors with artificial backdrops and creating a more dreamlike, more artistic and less narrative based story. The core of it is relatively straightforward. It starts with Sassoon publishing his declaration against the war while still fighting in the trenches, that he believed the war was being perpetuated for imperialistic reasons, that there was no end game being considered. It was simply a war perpetuating itself. And as a result, he was taken off the line and sent to a mental hospital in Scotland, where he was assessed and started developing a relationship with another fellow patient there, a budding poet named Wilfred Owen. Again, you will be familiar with the name. Um, and it's all but stated outright that the two became lovers, developed a romantic relationship. Sassoon's romantic life then becomes the spine of the rest of the movie as he becomes involved with the bright young things of the 1920s, um, develops a long-term relationship with the songwriter and actor Ivan Novello, right through until his marriage, which was simply a matter of convenience, and then further to the 1960s, towards the end of his life, where he's separated from his wife, a completely loveless relationship, and he has an awkward relationship with his now adult son, Michael. George. Sorry, his name was George, I remember. Um, I thought it was a terrific film. I was initially somewhat skeptical because I've only seen one of Davis's previous films, his adaptation of The House of Mirth. And the main reason I watched that was because the lead was played by Gillian Anderson, who has never delivered a terrible performance, and I thought that would be a good film. I found it very dull. With this film, I was initially aware of it because Peter Capaldi was in it. So I thought, well, might be interesting. And then I heard it was about Siegfried Sassoon. And then it turned up on Netflix, and it seemed everything pointing towards trying to get me to watch it. It's well over 2 hours long. It is not static necessarily, but it is quite verbal. It's a film without a great deal of action, but I found it completely consuming. I thought Lowden's performance as the younger Sassoon was incredibly intense and magnetic, compelling, easily the best performance I've seen this year. Capaldi is only in a few scenes as the older Sassoon and struggles with an accent that doesn't sound a great deal like what Loudon is doing. I think it might have been better perhaps to just ignore the strict realism of the film and have Capaldi speak in his native Glaswegian accent. But again, quiet, riddled with guilt, um, with pasts unspoken, and broken relationships wherever he's gone. His failed marriage, his all but estranged son, the many relationships he's had in the past that have ended badly, with Stephen Tennant, one of the bright young things of the 1920s. They reacquaint themselves in the 1960s, but there is only anger and bitterness from Sassoon. It's it's a hard film to talk about because it's all in the watching. It's all in the experiential nature of it. Um, but I found it incredibly watchable and engaging and compelling. It's an incredibly humanist story. Sassoon was an extraordinary man, and the film is, I think it does a great deal to try and illuminate his life in a way that hasn't been previously possible because he was all but openly gay at a time when it was still illegal. I believe he died just before homosexuality was partially decriminalized in 1967, literally weeks before. Um, but his nature as an artist and as someone who tended to keep, as far as I'm aware, something of a low public profile, particularly in the wake of his anti-war declarations in the past, meant that he could, in some ways, be himself, but also lived with the burden of guilt, and particularly the guilt that he had betrayed his comrades in arms in the trenches. He felt great kinship for fellow soldiers, and I recall that he went back to fighting on the trenches in the First World War, or something that isn't gone into in the film, because he felt guilty that he was away from the front on home soil when all the other men who he, as far as he was aware, felt exactly the same as he did, were still forced to live and die in mud and squalor. Later in his life, Sassoon converted to Catholicism, which is again part of the spine of the film, and hence the title of Benediction, because the guilt of his war record, of the lives he touched, and as far as he felt had irreparably damaged, had worn him down so much. It's the film is a portrait of a man, and it is compassionate and sensitive. It doesn't sugarcoat him. I mean, the older Sassoon is quite an unpleasant and difficult person. But having seen the previous hour and a half, you know why. You know why he has been driven to be this difficult, why he has pushed away his son, why he has wrecked his potentially perfectly amicable marriage of convenience. Um, and it's a great piece of work. Um, Both Lowden and Capaldi are extraordinary. Derek Davis's script is very finely wrought. The direction is superb. It's one of my favourite films of the year. Um, I recommend it very highly. As I say, it's currently on Netflix as of this recording. Who knows how long it's going to stay there. It was also a BBC film production, so I expect it to turn up on television relatively soon. But I strongly recommend you seek it out. It's a really extraordinary piece of work, and you should watch it.